Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. So inshallah, today we'll be commencing with the first section regarding this. So as I mentioned last time, there are 5 main headings and we are right here. We're discussing the first section. And in this section, there are 2 primary things. Number 1 is Usool at-Tafseer. What is Usool, what is Tafseer? And number 2 is the history and the development of Usool at-Tafseer. Okay, so the first section we have here is Al-Fasl al-Awwal, Usool at-Tafseer wa Tarikhuha. That's our first section. Usool al-Tafseer. So what is Usool, what is Tafseer, what is Usool al-Tafseer, and the history of Tafseer. And then within each fasl, we have 2 mabhath in this section, 2 subheadings. The first discussion is Ta'reef Usool al-Tafseer. That's what we're discussing today. What is and how do we define Usool al-Tafseer? Okay, so the first mabhath has 2 mas'ala. The first mas'ala, well, has 3 mas'ala. The first mas'ala is, when you say Usool al-Tafseer, what does asal mean? Asal. So linguistically, asal is called asfalu shay. The bottom of anything is called the asal. Similarly, anything upon which you lay anything else is called the asal. So then we translate this in English as what? What do you translate it as? Fundamentals, fundamentals and foundations. Fundamentals or foundations. And then the foundations physically are foundations of a building, etc. And metaphorically is then starting principles. So we say principles. And he says, وَمَا يُبْنَى عَلَيْهِ غَيْرُهُ, that upon which other things are based. So we say here, fundamentals or basic rules. Okay? And when we say usul, not in terms of linguistically, but in any science, whether it's nahwa, whether it's sarf, whether it's balagha, whether it's hadith, whether it's tafsir, whether it's aqidah, is usul. So usul refers to usus. Usus is again foundations. التي يعتمد عليها علم, upon which a science is based. So for example, the usul of tafsir are the rules upon which tafsir is based. Usul hadith are those rules upon which the science of hadith are based. Yes, usul fiqh. So fiqh is a science, we know the masail, but the rules upon which this science is based, how do we get these masail? How do we derive farad? How do we derive wajib? Is there a difference? What makes mustahab? What makes sunnah? What makes mu'akkada? These are principles, underlying rules. Why can we take a hadith? Why can we not take a hadith? Can we take one scholar's poem to prove the meaning of a word? So all of these fundamentals. So usul are those fundamentals. Usus are those fundamental rules. Fundamentals alayha, upon which any science is based. So usul tafsir, usul hadith, usul fiqh. You don't really have usul, you don't call it usul al-nahu, you have qawaid al-nahu. But yeah, same thing. So the first thing is now we know what usul means. So aslun is a singular, usul is a plural. And usul is the basic foundation, fundamentals. And we say usul in terms of academic field, it means the fundamental principles upon which a science is based. Okay? Understood? Second mas'ala is tafsir. So obviously tafsir is from which bab taf'il. So the root letters are fasrun. So if you look in the proper dictionaries, you will see that all of the usages, the Arabs before Islam, they use the word fasr to mean kashf, idah, bayan, to open, to clarify, to remove ambiguity, to make clear. This is the meaning of fasrun. So if something becomes clear, you say, well, fasar, I'm not sure what bab it's from, but it means to become clear. So the tafsir they would then mean what? To make the meaning of the bayan, of the Quran clear. So fasr linguistically means to make clear. And then tafsir, or to become clear, to become munkashif, to become clear, to remove ambiguity. So when you do tafsir of the Quran, you're doing fasr of the Quran. You're removing any ambiguity, any unknown elements. So tafsir al-Quran then means what? Clarifying the meaning of the Quran al-Kareem. So clarifying the meaning of the Quran al-Kareem. That's called what? Tafsir. Yes? Now there's one thing here he mentioned in the book, it's quite important to remember, that when you're doing tafsir, okay, mufassirun, obviously there are many things linked to a tafsir. There are many things linked to tafsir. So they mention those things. So for example, even the fiqhi rulings that are derived from a verse may not necessarily fall, I'm not saying it's not useful, it's important, but it may not necessarily fall under tafsir. Because tafsir simply means to just clarify and give the meaning of the Quranic verse, what it means. Like, so for example, you were asking last time in Jalalain, إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. What's the benefit of having the word fitya? That's an istinbat. That's like a point, a fa'idah. We can derive a ruling or a lesson or a point Allah is trying to tell us. That's beneficial. But that's not tafsir. You understand? Tafsir literally means just to explain what it means. So we know what fitya means. And then along that, tafsir, the fiqhi rulings, that's not tafsir. It's useful, and many mufassirun have added in its tafsir. I'm not saying it's not, I'm saying that it doesn't, according to him, it doesn't make up the essence of tafsir. Similarly, for example, the qira'at, that's ilm al-qira'at. So like Baydawi, we've done in Baydawi, many times he mentions the different qira'at. Even Jalalain, he's mentioned the qira'at. But technically speaking, it's not tafsir. This is ilm al-qira'at. Sometimes we have discussion where the ayat, how many ayat are in the verse. You may have seen this before, I think within Nasafi, and you also seen in other tafsir, that at the beginning of the tafsir of the surah, they mention how many verses there are in this surah. That's again, it's beneficial, it's useful, fine. But it's not tafsir, because you're not explaining the meaning of the Quran. Some have said, it's ilmu addil ayat, or addil ay. Another science called counting the verses, a science, very smaller sub-science. Similarly, tajweed, how to enunciate the words. Is the qalqala or is the qalb or all of these things. This is separate. Tafsir is purely just explaining the meaning of the Quran. Okay? And then mufassir is who? The one who does tafsir. So any person who does tafsir, who explains the meaning of the Quran, he becomes a mufassir. So basically, if I tell you the meaning of the Quran, I'm mufassir. But when we say mufassir in our language, like in our urf, it means a person who has a malaka rasikha. Like not just like one-off, like reading a tafsir and just quoting it. Technically speaking, that is tafsir. So if you quote in tafsir, then you're just quoting. If you explain a meaning yourself, you're mufassir. But obviously then, when you say mufassir, mean one who's mufassirun kamilun, or mufassirun mu'taddun bihi. But linguistically, anyone who explains the meaning of a verse, he's a mufassir. But when we say mufassir, we don't mean any Amar Bakr and Zayd who does explanation. We mean the mufassirun, ay ulul ilm, and the mu'tad bihi mufassirun. But technically speaking, so when we say it, we mean the great ulama who have done tafsir properly, who can count and we can rely on for tafsir. But technically speaking, anyone who explains the meaning of the Quran is a mufassir. Understood? So we know what ilm, we know what usool is, and now we know what tafsir is. The next thing we're going to discuss is the third mas'ala is usool tafsir. So now we know what tafsir is, we know what usools are, principles are. How would we define usool tafsir? So we say here, usool tafsir are qawaid, are certain rules. So usool tafsir are certain rules. Yarja'u ilayha, we say here refer. There are certain rules to which, ilayha, you join the qawaid to that, to which a mufassir will refer back to, whether consciously or subconsciously. Sometimes, as we studied in many sciences, like, you don't refer back to the rules of nahwa to see if it's marfu or not, because you know it's fine, you've learned that subconsciously. We done in ilm al-mantiq, isaguti, so many of those things subconsciously. We know these rules, we apply these principles of analogy and syllogisms without even knowing what a syllogism is. But it's there. So you refer back to these principles, whether in terms of you consciously or subconsciously. There are certain principles any mufassir will refer back to when it's maf'ul fi. Hala bayanihi li ma'ani al-Quran wa al-ikhtilaf fiha. Whenever he's explaining the meaning of the Quran, or he's explaining the differences, when he explains the meaning, when he explains why the meaning differs, when he's explaining any of these things, there must be certain reasons, certain guidelines why he's picking one meaning over the other. So these rules, whether he knows them consciously or subconsciously, whether he explains it, the reason or not, there are certain rules where every mufassir will refer back to. Yes? Are you following? So this is what we say here. This is usool tafsir. Okay? Okay? So that's the end of the first babahath, the first discussion. So what have we covered so far? We are in al-fasl al-awwal regarding what the introductory matters. What is usool? What is tafsir? What is usool tafsir? So in the first section we discussed what is asal. In the second masala was what is tafsir. And the third masala was what is usool tafsir. And now from here we're going to move on to how did this come about? Who came up with this idea of usool tafsir? Where did it come from? Where did it start? Where did this thing come from? Understood? Any questions so far? Yes? So we stop here today inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.